We're going to freestyle the budget, John. It's coming in 2 days. I feel like we've been talking about it endlessly, but there's plenty to talk about, isn't there? Not least today, the announcement from Peter Kyle about businesses. I know we'll get more, well, I hope we'll get more on Wednesday, but it felt a bit like small fry, didn't it, really, in the grand scheme of the problems businesses are facing?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we know this is going to be a painful budget. We know that our taxes are going to go up and that we're all probably going to feel a lot worse off at the end of it and a bit more gloomy. What the government needs to do is to somehow convince people, which I think they've singularly failed to do so far, that it's tough now. But look at that sunny upland in the distance, which we're heading towards once we've created the growth that Britain needs and we've got a handle on our debt.
And here's the evidence it's working.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. And also there have been so many mixed messages, and I cannot remember a budget where there have been so many
back and forth
leaks, kites flown, kites pulled from the sky, having not flown very well. I think the days when it was, there was this Trappist monk silence about what a budget would be have long gone. We know that. But I've never seen so many different things. This is happening, that's happening, on pensions, on whatever it happens to be. These ideas get floated and then unfloated, and you just think, actually, you're just confusing people. And I suspect if you're a business, if you're an individual and you're thinking of making investment, are you going to do anything now with all the uncertainty?
There's a holding your breath feeling, isn't there?
Well, it's a holding feeling, but you're creating massive uncertainty. And I don't think that's good for the economy either.
There was a warning today at the CBI conference, or a plea almost more than a warning, not to create, I think the chair of the CBI called it death by 1,000 taxes, make some big, bold decisions that really do generate change rather than trying to please everybody all the time.
But you're then back to Labour's original sin, which I think is the original mistake that Labour made, which was when they were campaigning for the general election, said we wouldn't raise VAT, we wouldn't raise income tax, we wouldn't raise personal national insurance. In which case you're scrabbling down, let's see if I can find a fiver down the back of this sofa, and the old armchair over there, I might find a couple of quid in loose change, which you feel is what they're doing, and not addressing some of the fundamental problems. And so that is why they kind of moved towards the idea that there'd be an income tax raise in this budget, and then moved back from that. And so they marched everyone up to the top of the hill and then marched them back down again. And I think that's kind of led to this sense of chaos and uncertainty. And just one more thing on that, that seemed to have been baked in until 2 weeks ago, that they were going to raise income tax. Well, the fact that they haven't means that they're now making things up and having to find money from everywhere else.
For what that might have covered.
So it doesn't suggest that the budget will be the most carefully thought through thing that has been months in the planning. It will be, oh my God, we can't do that. We better do something else. What can we do?
Yeah, I'm sure you heard Ken Clarke talking to Lewis over the weekend,
I did.
Concluding, I don't think she's up to the job. And he's not an unkind man, Ken Clarke, is he, politically?
Well, I thought it was a fascinating interview because I mean, one of the things that's come out this weekend, and there have been a number of profiles of Rachel Reeves where if only we could see the real private Rachel Reeves, of the more fun, engaging, gossipy, and she is all of those things. I've seen her at private things, and she's great fun. And I think that she feels this need to be austere and serious, and I think that some of the political decisions that have been made, maybe they were forced upon her, maybe there's a bit of treasury capture as well, that kind of the winter fuel payments for pensioners had long been a treasury idea, not a Rachel Reeves idea, and she bought into it, and then it caused enormous backlash.
Politically clumsy,
had to reverse it. So you've alienated support, and then you try and win it back, and you don't win anyone back. They just think, oh, what the hell's going on with this government?
And I'm going to be talking after 3 about the so-called mansion tax, not a phrase she has used, and there's no confirmation yet on what will happen, but there's this rumour of houses over 2 million having an additional taxation placed on them via the banding system, or changes to the banding system for council tax. What struck me about that was there'll be plenty of people saying, oh, well, if you've got a £2 million house, you're fine, whatever, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't raise much, does it? 450 million?
Well, it doesn't raise much. And there's also... So, I mean, if you're living in an area where housing is very cheap, to live in a £2 million property, you're living in a mansion.
Yeah.
You can live in a 2-bedroom flat in one of the posher bits of London, and your flat will be worth more than £2 million. And if you're a widow or whatever in their 80s, and it's where your kids were, and you've had it for 40 years.
And it's probably your care costs, should that be needed.
Yeah, as well. And then you look at the cost of moving home, of stamp duty, and you think, oh my, I can't afford to move. And so then you're hit with stuff where you may not have a high income. You may be living on a little more than a state pension or a state pension.
Asset rich, money poor. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that's where it's kind of tough. And as you say, it will cause a lot of political problems with very little financial gain, which is why you go back to the original thing of, oh, kind of just do the bold stuff. But of course, that would mean breaking a manifesto pledge.
And we've talked a bit about taxes. I mean, all eyes on taxes, but all eyes on benefits too, because this was another example of where the party in government couldn't quite get what it wanted over the line.
Yeah,
spectacularly couldn't get it over the line.
I do think that you've got a Labour Party that's become slightly ungovernable. The backbenchers seem to believe in fairy tale economics a lot of the time, that, well, of course there should be money for everything, and we don't want to raise taxes on anyone. And you think, well, okay, that's fine. Well, how do you manage that? What does that look like in reality? And, the debt payments, the interest on the debt payments we are paying now per year,
absolutely eye-watering.
It's eye-watering. It's more than the Ministry of Defence budget. Just the interest payments on the debt, and it's now like 100% of GDP, and you think this is unsustainable, and so she needs to bear down on debt. Will anyone agree what that measure should be, whether it's welfare reform or tax increases? No. And so you are left in an absolute quandary about, look, the government has got an unenviable, it's got a very difficult hand, and it's playing it badly.
Oh, God. Away from that, the BBC executives, or several of them, including, I think, the chair, are going to be in front of MPs today in Parliament.
Yeah. And this comes after the resignation of the Director General, Tim Davie.
Head of News.
The Director of News, Deborah Tenness. And Samir Shah, the chair, is also under a huge amount of pressure. One of the governors resigned on Friday, citing governance issues. If that isn't aimed at the chair of the BBC, I don't know what is, and complaining that they weren't sufficiently brought in to some of their kind of complaints, the idea that there was this coup taking place within the BBC where, certain politically motivated governors, Sir Robbie Gibb, who had been Theresa May's...
He's due to appear, isn't he?
He's due to appear. Yeah. Samir Shah's due to appear. And a woman called Caroline Thompson, who used to be an exec at the BBC. Those three are due to appear. But before that, they're going to hear from Michael Prescott, who was the guy who wrote the report that got leaked to The Telegraph, talking about how, he was so frustrated, he was tearing his hair out because the BBC wouldn't take any notice of the complaints he had about coverage of trans issues, coverage of the Middle East, and, other things as well, that the BBC was in sort of, could never admit mistakes. And so that too is he's going to appear as well.
But there are those who say he was brought in by Robbie Gibb. His report was always going to say what it said. It can be ignored. I mean, there's big risk in that. I mean, it's not going to be ignored, but there's big risk in ignoring it, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there are big risks in ignoring it, but I think there was a breakdown in relations between some members of the board who were on this editorial standards or editorial guidelines and standards committee that was the sort of powerful committee that was weighing in on whether the BBC had failed on impartiality or not. There'd been a breakdown between the board and news, and the relationships had got very sour. But you've got a situation now where I'm hearing from a lot of former colleagues their fury at the chairman, Samir Shah, for allowing all this to have happened. And so...
And there was a lot of drift, wasn't there, after the initial report internally was
it took them a week to respond. So, one, there is fury at how badly the comms were handled on this. And two, there was an all-staff meeting where Samir Shah said it was disrespectful to suggest that there had been a coup and that there had been a problem with the governors and in their interference in BBC News. And I think that caused a lot of resentment. So, it's not impossible. It's not an impossible world that having had the resignations of the Director General
That we see.
and the CEO of News,
We see the chair go to.
you could see the chair go to. And then this at a time when we still don't know whether Donald Trump is going to launch a legal suit, and the BBC needs to be focusing on charter renewal and working out what the licence fee is. And that should be the sole focus of the corporation right now. And at the moment, it seems a little bit rudderless. And if the chairman goes, completely rudderless.